Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm going to be talking to you about a national project that I've been leading called Get There Together, a resource to support the people of Wales to access their communities. I'm going to start by sharing with you a short digital story that provides an overview of the project. This was created by Jenny Evans, who's an occupational therapy student who was on placement with this project.
Get There Together is a national project aimed at people living with dementia and their families. To help them to adjust to changes in the community due to COVID restrictions. Many people living with dementia have needed to isolate or shield. Them and their families have been worried about going back into the community now the restrictions are starting to lift. People affected by dementia have felt that they've experienced a deterioration in their condition, as well as increased memory loss, problems concentrating, and increased difficulty with reading and writing. Many felt that they had lost some of their abilities to complete daily tasks such as washing and dressing. Digital stories are around 2 minutes long, and using pictures, videos, voiceovers and text can help to relay important information. They can be used to highlight changes due to COVID restrictions, such as maintaining social distance, by showing examples of signs people could expect, one-way systems, they are available for specific community locations, such as shops, cafes or restaurants, healthcare services and community groups. As the videos are aimed at people living with dementia, it's important that they are accessible to all, so they will also be available in leaflet format and English and Welsh versions too. The project hopes that by using the videos, it will help lessen anxiety, reduce isolation and encourage inclusion for those individuals living with dementia. The digital stories will be available on the Dewis Cymru website for individuals and their families to access.
There is a national project group that provides governance. Each subgroup has a lead who attends the national group and feeds back to their region. We've been supported by Digital Communities Wales, who provided us with a training package on how to create a digital story. This means that all project members are following the same process. Some subgroups have been involved from the start of the project, whereas others have joined more recently, and all benefit from support and sharing with other members via the network. Each subgroup has a range of partners working together on the project. This is an example from the Gwent subgroup. The project has been active for less than a year and has achieved a lot in that time. At the moment, we have 76 videos uploaded onto Dewis Cymru. We've used survey and focus group feedback processes to speak to people in our communities about their experience of using the resources to understand whether we're meeting their needs, and to put that back into the project, the feedback, as part of our improvement cycle. We've had growing interest in the project, with new regional subgroups and new partners coming on board on an ongoing basis. Get There Together was launched with a comms campaign on the 10th of May 2021, and we've had media interest. The project was featured across BBC Wales platforms. It's been presented at a number of conferences, including an International Dementia Conference, the Centre for Aging and Dementia Research Conference, and more recently TechFest. We've got an article due to be published in the Journal of Dementia Care, and we've also got another submission that's been sent to the World Federation of Occupational Therapists, and that's about the experience of students being on placement with this project. So for our next steps, we've recently started working with the Accelerate programme, and we have formed a relationship with an industry partner who's producing 5 videos for us using 360 filming. And what we're going to do then is evaluate how these films are received compared to the standard digital stories that we've been creating so far. It's important that we understand how people living with dementia interact with the 360 films, and whether they're adding more to the experience or making things more complicated, so we can decide then what the best technique is going forward. We've got ongoing work on our evaluation of the resources. We're provided with Google Analytics from the Dewis Cymru site. And there's always a little delay with those coming through, so we're just waiting for the latest data since the launch. We've also started working with the Centre for Aging and Dementia Research, who are going to work with us on a small pilot evaluation, which will include speaking to some end users to examine the impact of the resources. We're also thinking about how we broaden the scope of the resources we're making. And an example of that is we've recently been thinking about care home residents and how we might adapt and develop resources to support them. And we're also considering other ways that the resources could be used. An example of this is we may look to develop an app that would allow the user to personalise the videos and create an activity calendar. So I just want to say thank you so much for listening. And on this slide, you can see links to our resources on Dewis Cymru. So please do take a look and share them.
We will now have a Q&A discussion. What were you trying to achieve with these stories?
So we'd spoken to people during the COVID pandemic who were living with dementia, and understood that accessing community locations or getting back to doing some of the things they were doing prior to the start of the pandemic was a challenge for them. So that was the inspiration for the project. And what we've been capturing in the videos is more, I guess, the kind of practical walkthrough of getting back to doing some of those activities or visiting venues. And what we did was have conversations again in those regional subgroups with the local communities to see where are the priority areas that you would like us to create resources for. And it was very broad. Some of them were things that we thought of ourselves on the group, like what it's like to go to your GP at the moment, and we created a video that kind of talks you, well, shows you through what it looks like now at the GP practice. But other things included very much like going for a walk, just leisure activities, being able to sort of do normal things again. So there's quite a variety of resources based on the sorts of things people described to us that they were looking for.
And do you have any feedback on the immediate impact that this has had?
We've started to do that. I mean, what we did as we developed our early resources was we had some focus groups or small service sort of user interviews that we worked with people like the Alzheimer's Society on. And we showed some of the resources to people and said, you know, what do you think to these? Are they looking useful? Are these the sorts of things that would help you? And resoundingly, yes. People were very keen to see the resources and felt they were really helpful. And we even had people who joined our project group who had shielded themselves for not because of dementia but for other reasons, who were saying, actually for me this is also really valuable and really helpful, and it helps me to sort of see what happens rather than someone describing it to me. And some of the feedback we had was really helpful about, you know, things like pacing of the videos, not including too much background music or noises. So what we were able to do from the small sort of feedback focus groups that we had was to put that back into the project and develop some top tips for creating further resources as we progressed.
You mentioned your regional subgroups. How did the regionalisation come about?
So when we first were talking to people, right at the beginning of having the idea, people were saying to us, if you produce very generic resources, they're not going to be as useful to me because it'll look different and feel different in my local area. So how I started was just putting a call out via the networks that I already have established to see if we could get interest. We've just built on that over time. So we started with just a small group of people. There was a bit of spread across Wales, and then we've developed sort of regions where people have formed relationships and groups in their regions with various partners, and that's been one of the really wonderful outcomes of the project, that we, you know, have formed these partnerships with people understanding each other and coming together as a community that perhaps wouldn't have been working together previously. And one of the things we want to evaluate is how that's worked with this project and whether we can use that sort of structure for other things going forward.
What were your major barriers?
I think the hardest thing was for people to get started. So in their regions to make that first step and to have the right sort of mix of skills in a group. And I think with some areas that were sort of smaller communities, they found it much easier to speak to the locations and services and get permission for the filming. Whereas for some of the bigger cities and places where we were approaching some of the bigger businesses, it was a bit more challenging to speak to the right person to get the permission. So I think that would be a learning point really in terms of how that's managed and coordinated. But one of the things that we did as the project progressed is create a lot of governance documents, if you like, or tips and how-to guides and things like that. So it's been constantly sort of, as we've learned, we've been developing resources that would help us. If we were starting the project from scratch, we'd have lots there now. And so when we're still getting new people joining. So we have, you know, a lot of resources there and learning that people can capitalise on from the start now.
Who else might be able to access and use this resource?
Thank you, Jackie. Yeah, that's a really good point in terms of who the resources are aimed at. And I think, you know, you raise a good point about actually what we're doing when we're sharing and publicising the resources is that thinking prudently, it may be that there are people who have the abilities to access the resources and use them for their own purpose independently, but there will be populations who need more support. This is definitely not going to be all the answer for lots of people who have really had trauma through the pandemic and, you know, suffered significant loss of skills and abilities, but it's a part then of possible care. So it's something that professionals, voluntary services can signpost people to and support them with during their care process. So we are marketing them quite widely and using it as an opportunity, as you said, to have those conversations with professionals to make them aware that these may be challenges that people are experiencing.
Could you expand on the support you had from Digital Communities Wales?
Yeah, so Digital Communities Wales are fantastic support in terms of helping people with digital skills and support, and they cover the whole of Wales. So there's an officer in each sort of region of Wales, and what they do is they provide some training packages which we were able to take advantage of as the project. One of the ones that they deliver is how to create a digital story, and it's a 1 hour virtual training session. And so everyone who was involved in our project has done that training, and they've been so supportive in putting that on for us for free and looking at dates with us as to when we've got suitable dates. We've also had some delivery in Welsh language, and they're able to facilitate that, and it just means that we're following the same structure. But what they also do with that package is they share how to create a digital story using a free app, using your phone if that's all you've got. So so people involved in the project had no need to have any prior experience of making films, but you get a skill as well. So people are using those skills now to create digital stories for other things, like maybe what Jackie was referring to, like life story work, lots of other ways that you can use that skill then as well.
Have you given any thought to how you might use this in a wider context?
Yeah, definitely. So we have started to. So some of the resources that we are creating more recently are not related to COVID and are related to experience of visiting places, or one of the things that we're considering as well is kind of how we show people what things sound like too when you're going to somewhere. So we've recently done a clip with Great Western Railway on the experience of catching a train and some of the noises to sort of prepare people for which can be a particular issue if you're living with conditions like dementia, that you can be more sensitive or not recognise what sounds mean. We're also doing things like the experience we're looking at doing of going through a brain scan, so that can be used to share with people if they're invited for one. So we're really interested to see how this type of resource could be used outside of just the pandemic, but there's still definitely a need for these resources at the moment. We're hearing very recently from care homes that people are very, very afraid about going out, some even leaving their rooms. So we're not out of that just yet, unfortunately.